have the clicker somewhere in there, don't you?
I do.
Okay, you got it in your pocket. Good. It's right behind you.
Oh, beautiful.
There you go.
No coffee, so.
Elliot they've just launched a product yesterday, which is why we're doing this today, because doing it yesterday would have been cruel.
Yes, it was a bit crazy, yeah.
But we are going to get to talking about that new product. But first, I think all of us know Quip from the sheer volume of advertising, the ubiquity, especially in social channels. So why don't you give us a little, I'd like to drill into, start out with what you've learned from those channels. Let's start with where Quip started in its advertising journey.
Yeah, so I guess when I started around 2 years ago, also good morning everyone. When I started around 2 years ago, we were mainly on social, so following the same trajectory as other D2C brands where we were really finding our bread and butter on social, very data driven. We can see like how it's performing immediately. It's easy to scale and also pull back, but that also means you're sort of speaking to one audience to some degree. There's a specific demographic that buys more heavily from social than from other channels. So we wanted to expand beyond that, and our mission really is accessibility. And our product can speak to everyone. Everyone has a mouth. Everyone brushes their teeth 2 minutes twice a day. So it makes sense for us to be in a lot of places at once and have that sort of chorus effect.
I want to drill into how you discovered that, because I think that's an important point. And acquisition is one of the things that almost everybody who responded to our first survey said is a challenge for them. First of all, you've described to me when we were talking social as a kind of echo chamber. What was the demographic that you were heavying up on in social that you were finding? But I'm really curious, how did you discover what you didn't know? In the sense that how did you discover who you weren't talking to and that you weren't talking to them and that you were in a kind of echo chamber?
Yeah, so I think we all kind of know the person who buys on social is typically younger, a younger millennial or even now older Gen Z, who is skews female, but also more sort of qualitatively, it's someone who buys other brands that are direct brands that are just getting their footing. So we saw a lot of social posts from folks, tagging us and a lot of the other brands in this room, which is really great. We like to have those loyal users who, associate our brands with other amazing challenger brands. But also, we realized that there are a lot of people in this country and the world outside of New York City and San Francisco and the major urban areas, and so how can we expand beyond that and reach those folks as well?
You were finding this by getting outside your own data. I think that's what's critical and interesting, is that you weren't just looking at your ad manager to discover this.
Well, yeah, I mean, I guess like Facebook Ads Manager or any of that data is like a self-fulfilling prophecy. It creates, when you're spending money on those channels, you're going to get the user that's buying from those channels. So how do you expand to new demographics? That was a challenge that we had, and we sort of, that's why we tested into, now we're on everything from paid social to TV. So that includes audio, direct mail. We work with MediaPost in here, who was talking earlier. So yeah, that definitely was a challenge.
What were some of these new levels of new audiences that you were reaching that you hadn't seen before?
Yeah, I mean, so for us, it was really about understanding our user, and so doing a lot of that user research. You can assume like who the buyer is, but there are also small pockets that that you could groom to become a loyal audience and that you could also sell to in the long run. So for example, one demographic was sort of like the techie dad, so like a 40-year-old man who lives in a suburb or an exurb, tends to be relatively high income and likes to buy like tech toys, that are things that people aren't super excited about. Aren't usually super excited about, but he is. So like he'll buy this like cool toothbrush that he's gonna talk about to everyone, and buy it for his whole family. So we really found those sort of new groups, and then started targeting them. So like an example is one of our best performing sort of, I guess, verticals within podcasts or themes is news. and as well as on radio, and those folks tend to listen to those podcasts.
I want to drill into a few of these channels that you're doing because you're everywhere, and I think you have a lot to tell us about some of these channels that you've been experimenting with, podcasting, for instance. What have you found about what works and what doesn't work, and the measurability of this and the scalability of podcasting, since that's a big question within the podcasting world now?
I mean, I would say we're still trying to figure it out, and I think that's probably funny because we're on a lot of podcasts. But at the end of the day, I think it comes down to authenticity and making sure that you're creative-wise, you have like pretty strict brand guidelines, but you're letting sort of the podcast host to riff off of what they think of your product and what they really care about, because it tends to be that their audience will care about the same thing. So it's different than TV. It's not you're cutting to commercial break and then the brand is saying something and it has a total disconnect from the show if you're watching Friends or something. But on a podcast, you hear the commercial music and then it's the same person most of the time, unless it's like Oprah's podcast, you'll hear that host endorsing your product. So it's really important to build those relationships with those hosts and make sure that they feel empowered to talk about your brand in an authentic way.
But you started out as such a performance-driven, data-driven company. When you move into something like podcasting, this is working on a different metric, if arguably there's a metric at all, because those little call-outs to go to specific URLs or addresses, they're supposed to register the hit from podcasting. That's not the metric that's really working best here. How are you folding podcasting and coming up with a metric that makes sense to justify the spend?
Yeah, so there are a few different methods for that. One, yes, that link that most people don't go to, but also tactically we have like a post-checkout survey that we incentivize our users to take, and that actually it has been really helpful for us. But also understanding that, especially for us with a product that is like anyone can use, if we can maintain that chorus effect, and also we now have a footprint in national retail, we can see that that long tail of brand awareness, not only in national retail, but also through an increase in traffic, and then that leads to conversions down the line.
So for something like podcasting, you're not relying on the podcasting metric at all, primarily, that you're offered so much as back-end surveys that are actually giving you a sense of what the customer journey was.
Right, exactly, yeah. Yes.
I'm curious about that customer journey and what you know about, again, the volume sort of speaks for itself and makes one wonder how much you know about the customer journey for this product, how many touches it takes to convert, and what you know about that, and how that figures into all this.
So it really depends on the user. For us, like our consideration phase is pretty short, but it depends. We're doing a lot of work right now into understanding the user based on the source they're coming from, which is really tough because we now are on so many different channels, and within those channels, there are so many different audiences. So like an example is on TV, a user who's watching a news show and sees a 1-minute ad is very different than someone who's watching a crime show and sees a 15-second ad. And they will take a different amount of touches to lead to conversion. And so I think there's still a lot of work for us to do there, but we're going at it from that understanding that every user is different and really personalizing that messaging.
Well, every user, or is the source the proxy for the user? I mean,
yes.
Is every user really different? Are you actually tracking personally, or are you using the source as a kind of a proxy for understanding what kind of profiling, what kind of customer journey they're on?
So it's a combination. So source, but also we also have data on the user, not only from source, but so we'll understand where they live, their demographics. So it's making sure that we're aggregating that together. So they're not just the source that they're coming from, but they're also what age they are. They're also a gender and all that fun stuff.
So we talk a lot about media fragmentation, and it's like you're taking a deep dive right in the middle of it. You're being everywhere. You're experimenting with all these different channels. You're even doing things like trying to understand specific customer journeys based on each of those. That's a lot to manage internally. Can you tell us a little bit about how you're actually structuring your organization so you can monitor all of these fragments, make sense of them, and do it in some sort of efficient way?
Yeah, so I mean that's something we're working on. I know yesterday we talked about how talent acquisition is a big challenge for all of the brands in the room, but mainly on the marketing team. We are really analyst driven, so we have multiple analysts who, more so are focused on digging into that data, and that's their day to day, rather than just optimizing channels. It's more so understanding the user and really centering that.
So you have a layer of analysts who are talking to you as a media team and doing it that way. Before we move out of this whole media matrix that you guys that I think is fascinating, the way that you guys are using so many different media. You're also using, and this was a point I wanted to bring up. You're also even penetrating the senior group or the 55 plus group. I'm 60, so 55 plus. So this isn't a senior group as far as I'm concerned. But you are actually these hip young products are actually penetrating into that segment. How are you doing that, reaching that segment?
Yeah, so the older audience, they're very loyal, and but they care about different things, and you reach them in different ways. Obviously, social, not so much. They tend to have a lot of questions. So I guess one example, I think Outbrain is in the room. So yes, native programmatic has been really helpful for reaching that audience because that gives them basically it's in a space that they trust, and then they also are able to gather more information on the product, and we're also able to tailor landing pages to the value propositions that they care about, which are slightly different than what younger folks care about. They really care about sort of the fine print and making sure that it has X, Y, Z, rather than sort of the emotional appeal.
So you're also describing, before we go into the product development and the product you launched yesterday, this also raises the question of how much creative are you generating? Are you doing it all in-house? How have you created a content team that can handle all of what you've just described is highly personalized, a lot of creative variance? How is that working as a content production?
Yeah, I mean it's definitely in-house. I think So yeah, we work fully in-house, don't really work with any agencies as of yet in terms of creative production, other than one TV ad. But I think it really comes down to strategy and making sure that you can be pretty modular in your creative production. So making sure you can create as little amount of assets as possible, and those can be distributed in as many ways as possible where they might mean different things to different audiences if they're paired with different copy variants. And so it really comes down to the strategy, and that's how you can make best use of creative resourcing.
We should show some of these things.
Oh yes.
We've been talking so much we forgot. We have some things to show.
Good visuals. So yeah, I guess in terms of kids launch, this was done all in-house. So we launched the kids product yesterday, which was really exciting for us because it's reaching. Our product does speak to everyone. This is very different in the sense that it speaks to mostly just parents and children, or people who have children in their lives if they're gifting for nieces and nephews. So yeah, this is an example of that product that we released yesterday.
Let's drill into what went into this launch, because it's a kind of a case of the ways in which you guys work and the ways in which research and talking to people matter. So bring us a little bit inside how you decided on that this was going to be your next big product and how you designed it. And how researched.
Yeah, so if you want to look, so this is the comparison between the adult brush and the kids brush, which they don't look that different, and that's actually really intentional. So in our post-checkout survey, we actually also ask what product you'd like to see from us next, and one of those things was kids. A lot of people answered that, and then we had an audience of people who wanted kids products from us, so we were able to survey them. And then from that group, we were also able to drill down sort of a research squad. So there are around 50 children, as well as a group of pediatric dentists and hygienists, and they also had children patients who we were able to use them as user testers. So we went through 3 major testing phases. The first was just understanding how they feel about brushing their teeth, how they feel about their toothbrush now, and how they how they feel about the original Quip. And one thing we noticed from the get-go is that kids actually feel proud to use something that their parents are using, and they'd rather like feel more grown up than using something that has like a bunch of childish gimmicks, which is kind of interesting because a lot of the other products in the category have like a bunch of stickers. They're like Disney branded. They have a bunch of colors. So it's like it kind of made us rethink and understand, oh, this is more about like their psychology, which goes back to the fundamentals of Quip in the first place, is building good habits and how do we do that. And we wanted to sort of suss that out more. So from those learnings, we created a prototype and then gathered insights from that. After that, moved into a third wave with a finalized prototype and design that also included the out-of-box experience. And from that was when we really realized, wow, this is really powerful. The fact that kids can feel proud to use something that their parents use. And this was also backed up by research. Parents who tend to have better oral health habits, their children tend to have better oral health habits too. It's really about setting an example. The kids were really excited to get it in the mail and open up their package, and it sort of has that same like experience that we have when we order something online, and we're really excited when it shows up. But in terms of actual small design changes, we just changed the size of the brush head because they have smaller mouths, and we made a more grippy handle because they have less dexterity or they're developing dexterity, and then changed the flavor of our toothpaste because
that was
they don't
actually
like
something
mint.
you discovered along the way, right? The dexterity issue was actually something you discovered along the way that maybe other toothbrush manufacturers didn't even know.
Yeah, so we originally were thinking about making the handle a lot thicker because a lot of other products had like these really big handles because I guess they assume that kids just need something big and that's what will make them hold it better. And then we just discovered that, oh no, we don't need to make a bigger handle. We can just add a little bit of grip to it, and kids, that works. So yeah, that was
right.
A nice
And again,
learning.
you didn't want to undermine the key psychological insight. It was that they wanted to mimic their parents in some way. And so I think what really sort of one of the themes that courses through this conversation is the limitations of data and knowing when not to lean on the data. I mean, it's something that informed how you transformed and broadened your advertising as you learned that you weren't going to find out everything you needed from Ads Manager, and you needed to start branching out and start listening to individual users and get a sense of what the limitations were. In this instance, you needed to you needed to move away from whatever instincts you may have had on what a kid's toothbrush should be, and you really had to do some what sounds like an intense set of multi-wave actual prototyping and testing with kids and talking and psychological insight into the consumers. It sounds like this is a company that we've always thought about as very data-driven, very performance-driven, but you really also are a lesson in the limitations of data.
Yeah, so I mean, our founder's a product designer, so we're really focused on making sure we're understanding the user fundamentally, and we're designing not only products but also services, and our content is helpful to them, and it's doing something for them that is that they want, which sounds really simple, but I think a lot of folks don't sort of go back to that founding principle.
But now you've got the challenge of have a kid's product and you have their natural and legal limitations on how much you can market directly to kids, especially in a lot of these social channels. So what's the marketing plan for this?
So we actually are not putting that much marketing spend behind kids right now. It's really viewed as, and the reason, so this image makes, we always are sort of showing our adult product with the kids product is because we're not just selling a product, we're selling the whole family on Quip, and this idea of the whole family on Quip. So at the end of the day, the parent is still making that purchasing decision. So, and we want to make sure that the parent also owns Quip, or uses Quip, because that has long-term effects on their kids' habits as well. So it's really about selling Quip as a whole to the family rather than just kids' Quip. So we're going to be tailoring messaging, like having like supplementary messaging on specific channels that have audiences that tend to be parents. But we're not really putting spend behind like hero messaging in terms of kids quite yet.
Yeah. But this is part of a stage, right? I mean, you're going to do, part of this is learning what resonates and maybe what channels to start using when you do go broadly.
Yeah, so I mean, that's the thing. We know who answered. We know the folks who answered kids in our post-checkout survey, but that might be different than the actual purchasing behavior. So we already actually have a lot of data from yesterday in terms of who's buying. So it'll be interesting to further dig into that and understand, from what marketing sources, what they're buying, what their average order value looks like, even their subscription attach rate, all exciting stuff.
And that was, you got the data, that was before or after you crashed the site?
You
had one of the legendary successes yesterday, is the launch of this crashed your site.
Yes, always fun stuff in the D2C world.
I want to sort of circle around all of this with the broader plan for Quip and how you're moving not only outside of that core devoted audience, but now also broadening the brand and the brand concept around it. And you're getting beyond the toothbrush. You've made some acquisitions lately that point towards a different destiny for Quip. Could you tell us about what those were and the branding idea that's driving this?
Yeah, so Quip's founding idea wasn't just about making a product. It was about building good habits that last a lifetime, and that isn't just about the products that you use every day. It's also about the dental professional services that you get, and that builds, the products that you use every day need to be connected to the dental care that you get every 6 months, because if not, then there's that disconnect. The preventative products that you're using aren't matching with your preventative care. Therefore, you might have to get reparative or restorative work. So it's really about that mission of improving the entire oral care routine and oral health for everyone. So we recently acquired an alternative to dental insurance called Afora. It's a dental care membership plan. And we really just want to make oral care, not just products, but also services, more simple, affordable, and enjoyable. And yeah, that's what we're working on towards in the future in 2019.
So ultimately, it's the brand sort of owning or broadening to a whole category of someone's life, their dental health, and being identified with that. So how do you avoid simply, oh, Quip bought an insurance company. Oh, okay, that makes sense. That's interesting. And actually having the authenticity and the authority to do that with your customers, where they're going to trust you to move into this, which really seems like to you a related product, but to others saying, well, I bought a toothbrush from these guys, now I'm going to buy a dental plan from them.
No, yeah, I agree. It's a major jump. But that's also, we're willing to take that risk, but because we realize the health implications it has, just in terms of our mission. It's really important for people to visit the dentist, and a lot of people just don't have access to that. But also, I think there's something to be said for the trust that D2C brands and a lot of brands in this room can build with our users and have this ultimate digital connection that other incumbent or legacy brands might not be able to do right now. We have a direct line to all of our users. We have started some sort of brand initiatives that help increase their trust and their association with us as care, our content and newsletters and advice. We have multiple dental professionals on our team who help provide advice that we can make it a little bit more palatable and fun and not super clinical for our audience. So we're trying to move in that direction already and sort of build this oral health authority. So our users are primed for that. And also, it goes back to sort of what we were talking about in terms of kids and understanding our user. Yeah, they do have reservations in terms of buying services from a company that sold them a toothbrush, but they also are really excited to learn what we're doing there. And a lot of people had reservations about buying a product online 5 to 10 years ago, and so it's just about changing their perspective.
And you guys were, at least, you were smart enough, and maybe this was the vision all along to move beyond the toothbrushes. You have that kind of service element baked into the core product, because when you subscribe to the product, you're not only getting new toothbrush heads, but you're getting reminders of dental checkups and things like that, plus more information about dental health. So you're sort of building the authority that way to move into this other area.
Yeah. So again, it came back to our founding idea of improving oral health, and we have this, subscription. We have this touch point with folks every 3 months, and then we also email them pretty consistently, and we want to make sure that we're reminding them to visit the dentist. That's very important. Another part of it is we have a large network of dental professionals. So we have over 20,000 dental professionals in our network. So that's dentists, hygienists, dental students, dental assistants, even dental office staff. And how can we connect that dental network with our users in a way that's helpful for our users? How can they find dentists that Quip trusts, or dentists that might reward them with a brush head if they visit the dentist on time? So that's what we've been doing right now, and it's just about expanding upon that.
We have some time for questions. Yep, back here.
All the way back there. Hold on one second. Go.
How you doing? Nolan Simons with Adobe Ad Cloud TV. So I have a specific question around television, obviously. So you mentioned podcasts. You typically are tracking via survey, but how are you measuring success with television, tying not only to digital actions, but also across those different audiences, like older and younger?
Well, the folks from Tatari in the room, where are you? Are they here this morning? Yes. They're our partners. I mean, yeah, TV is a whole a new ballgame for us, and I still think we're trying to figure out how to do that. But it's about partner selection, making sure your partners you level set what data that you expect from the performance of TV campaigns. But also viewing it from a brand awareness perspective is really important for us. Again, we have like a national footprint in retail, so brand awareness is really important. So it's half we're still a direct response-minded company, but also half with the understanding that a lot of our sales come from national retail, and we can measure that through like the post-checkout survey and other sort of like survey-based data. If that makes sense.
We have another one back here.
Hey, Elliot. Taylor Core with Quantcast. My question's very similar. You had mentioned the chorus effect, which I think is a great term for kind of what you're doing with all your channels. A lot of brands we talk to struggle because social, you have such a great performance feedback with what you're doing with your channels. Then you go beyond that, and you've got so many different things going on. You mentioned the post... the survey that they do after checkout, but was curious how you measure kind of the effectiveness of your chorus effect and know that you're hitting these audiences with the right frequency and the right channels, and then the difficulties of comparing, say, a podcast to search to display to video. Just curious how you look at all that as one holistic picture.
Yeah, sure. Are you curious as to what we're comparing? So how we view the chorus effect like as effective overall, or how we isolate certain channels and then isolate what KPIs we expect from those channels?
I guess a little bit of both. Yeah, because I think that's a challenge when people go from social to display or social to video. How should they consider those channels individually? And then I guess overall, kind of how you think about that as one big mix.
Yeah, I mean, so going back to basically, like, it's that idea that direct response is brand awareness. So fundamentally, starting with that at the outset, and I guess it's about measuring. We sort of look at how those survey responses change over time and how our spend changes over time, and see if we can like come up with some causation or correlation. Trying to think of an example, but I guess yesterday we were, or 2 days ago, we were featured on like Hoda's favorite things on the Today Show. So naturally our post-checkout survey actually went up for TV. It wasn't necessarily a TV ad. We weren't spending on TV because that was earned media, but we saw that more folks were answering TV, and then we also looked into who those folks were and who that user was, and it kind of aligned with the demographic of the viewers of that show. And then we're going to look into potentially how we can put paid spend behind those users based on how their purchasing behavior pans out, if that makes sense.
Oh yeah, well, I think what's really interesting about this is this approach to branding, this idea that in order to avoid brand blindness and brand apathy, that we sort of open the show with the statistics about how few people really care about their brands, is brands need to start thinking outside of specific products and specific product pitches and look at the ways in which they actually weave into people's everyday lives. They become rituals that are of meaning and of importance in people's everyday lives. And this is something I think a lot of the direct-to-consumer brands actually have an upper hand with. And this is I think yours is an interesting exercise in how a simple, and that many would say was an unlikely product, actually expands into something much bigger and weaves its way into people's rituals. And that's how branding of the next generation is going to matter, maybe. We'll see.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's really important going back to being an authority on a topic and thought leadership, I think it's really important in the world of Amazon, in the world where people might be buying things from one place, it's really important to have that thought leadership, because then someone can go to you as the authority on that topic, especially if it's in regards to health. If you build brand equity behind that, they're going to come to you first. And when someone's just buying something from a marketplace, there's that disconnect versus you having that authority and your customer trusting you to help improve their lives in a way that really helps them.
Elliot, Friar, thank you very much.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks very much. Let me actually leave the remote, leave the mic, and leave the remote.
All right, beautiful.
Take the cannoli.